Just to make from the chair, one of the issues is not so much profit. Mike Gover said he doesn't mind them making profit in the future, he's not actually opposed to that. But meanwhile, because they're having to buy in services that otherwise in ordinary schools local authorities will provide, those are private providers. So the money that the taxpayer puts into those schools will then be transferred to private companies to provide the services that the free school uses. With the list of schools that we've got so far, I think, is it 3 or 4 of them are ARC, Absolute Return for Kids, which is a provider of academies, and that's actually funded by a hedge fund speculation firm. They've opened academies and now they're moving into providing free schools under the same banner in different parts of the country. Just to check, we're being filmed at the moment by Pete for possibly a Green Party Trade Union blog or the Green Left blog or whatever. If there's anyone who doesn't want to be filmed when they make a contribution, can you just let us know? Because I don't want you all to be captured on film if you don't want to be. Okay, I'm going to open it up now to contributions. Wow, you were very quick off the mark.
Oh yeah, I've got, well, I'm Sue Shanks, I'm councillor in Brighton and Hove, and I'm actually cabinet member for children and young people, so I'm sort of, well, in theory, I would have some power, but the problem I think is it seems to me in terms of what you were saying earlier about places in primary schools, particularly Brighton has a similar position. As a local authority, we have a duty to provide places, school places, but if we're not going to have control because we have no money from the government, you know, we have got pressure on places, we do need to provide new schools or expand existing ones, and one of the reasons we're expanding existing ones is to avoid the getting into the free school argument. So sort of we've got a new primary school which we're actually calling part of another primary school which isn't very near, just because we didn't want that to become a free school. So in terms of planning, it takes away our ability to plan where we really need the schools, which area of the community, because the free school can set up where it likes. The problem I think the free schools have had, and perhaps that's a national problem, and it certainly is in Brighton, is finding premises anyway. Because if we had lots of premises, we perhaps have used them in the past for primary schools. I mean, Brighton's certainly a back of places that you might think of opening a school. But if you can find a premise, then the government will pay for that. So it takes it completely out of our control. So I think it's, I mean, there's some new planning regulations around it, which sorts to say the local authority must make its sort of expertise available to help local people in a free school find a premise. I mean, we've got a bilingual school in sort of progress, Spanish, English primary school, and we've got a Muslim school, which is, you know, another concern of mine in terms of faith schools. But I think I think there's an issue about how the local authority, in its duties, which are legal duties, is actually going to be able to perform those duties because of the way that's taken away, but also the financial aspect of it. I mean, in fact, we have very little money now in the local authority that's spent on those general support services, and increasingly less and less. And actually we're tending to say to schools now, actually, this is something you need to provide. You know, things like music services. I mean, this has been cuts all over the country.
So it's privatisation by the back door.
Well, it is in a way, because then the school, you know, we don't have the money in the local authority because it's all being put into schools anyway, and certainly in academies, all the money's gone to academies. So there's not much left to sort of provide those support and advice services now in local authorities. So yeah, I think what we're trying to do in Brighton and Hove, and I think there are patterns around the country as well doing this, where they're trying to get particularly the secondary schools to work together and sort of commission or even some sort of ideas about having some cooperative schools. And I think we're just beginning to think whether we can encourage people who are keen on educational principles much more, you know, in terms of choice for children, because I think one of the problems about this, it's all based on choice for parents rather than choice for children, who actually often want to go to the local school because they know their mates around the corner. You know, they don't necessarily want to be bussed across the city to a bilingual school, but so it's, you know, it tends to be about parental choice rather than children's choice. But I think we're thinking about whether it would be possible to support the sort of developments that might encourage a more sort of liberal education, you know, system. But I think because of the way it's set out, that's not Michael Gove's idea.
No.
You know, So I don't know how easy that would be to do. It would probably have to be outside the local authority in terms of it would have to be just us sort of by the back door supporting people.
What our local authority in Brent is doing, because of the shortage of places, is that they have agreed to go with other London boroughs to actually ask for the money to build new community local authority schools. Whether they succeed in that or not, but rather a sort of piecemeal issue of new free schools, perhaps emerging or perhaps not. You also wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, the Tories dress it all up in terms of this myth of variety, choice, and opportunity, and so on. I mean, the reality is that we've got more postcode lottery than we've ever had before in education. It's completely random, what sort of education service you're going to get in any given area. And it's very, very easy for us to knock it all, but we need to perhaps focus more on what we're going to offer as an alternative in its place. And basically, I've got a 20-year education background, and when I first came into the teaching profession, comprehensive schools were getting a very bad press and so on. When you start doing some research into it, we've never had a truly comprehensive education service in this country. When you look at places that have, the research I've done led me to all places, North Carolina and the schools in Raleigh there, which you may be familiar with. They've got truly comprehensive principles, and the results in 10 years were outstanding there. Right? So, I think we can waste a lot of time and energy knocking the free schools and the academies and so on. That's not going to get us very far unless we've got a very positive agenda of what we're going to put in its place.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that last one as well. Fundamentally opposed to free schools and everything they stand for.
Can you
oh, sorry, Gus Hope, Bristol Green Party. I'm also on the CYPS scrutiny committee now as well. It's the first time we've been on that. We have a Liberal-run council, and CYPS is being chaired by a Tory. So no matter how much people on the committee speak up and against free schools, it's going ahead. I mean, they're pushing that as the only alternative. They're also not going to invest in any primary schools in areas that are in dire need of them. Some wards don't even have any primary schools, and people are bused back and forth all over the city. Everyone wants to live in their community, have their kids in their community, and so on, so forth. I'm facing a real dilemma now of whether to talk to parents who, in certain areas, that they all live, walk, cycle, very few own cars. They want to set up schools in their neighbourhood, and the current primary schools, the governors, even though they're responsible for all the children in the community, not just the ones at their school, are refusing to grow. The head of education has said that because there's a 97% of children get a place at a school, that there's no problem and we don't really need to look into it any further. And this is despite everything from the scrutiny committee. I'm wondering whether to even work with parents to see how we can turn free schools around to our advantage. I know it's quite crazy, but I'm just wondering if anyone has any ideas. I know you're sort of opposing the idea opposing the idea, but at the same time, you perhaps using it. I don't know.
Well, that's the whole
clutching at
straws. Dilemmas. We're focusing on something that's very real in terms of policy in various localities.
Yes, Richard Beerman, Norwich Green Party, and Children's Services Scrutiny for Norfolk County Council. I've got a free school opened in my division. I think it's instinctively easy for Greens to be opposed to an academy or a free school when it's sponsored by big business or Tesco's or Rupert Murdoch or any of the things that we don't particularly like ideologically. Where do we stand on the local community or Steiner schools who come to us and say they want to set up a free school or possibly an alternative education provider? We've been fighting to save an alternative provider who is likely to go under providing alternative education for those excluded in year 10 and 11, future education. They are being persuaded by the government to go for free school status. So does our campaign continue with them? Or I think the route we may have to take as a local party, and we probably will take, is that we look at each case on its merits, and maybe there are opportunities where there is genuine parental need or parental control and want to make good use of the process, but by the same token, we have to be very clear that it's the government driving this top-down educational process, giving money to free schools and allowing them all the freedoms. It's not encouraging community or local involvement at all, and it's going to have a significant effect on any other community schools in the area. So I'm quite worried about a blanket approach, but I do think there's going to have to be a mechanism for local parties and the National Party to say there are some aspects we can support and some aspects we can't support, and I'm not clear where that dividing line comes yet.
It has been faced by some other parties.
Yeah, Peter Allen from Derbyshire Green Party, not qualified to speak except as a parent whose children have gone through the school system, and they went to a very good primary school and a probably poor secondary school. But actually the truth of the matter was, the reason why the primary school was good was it is in a quite wealthy catchment area, firstly, and secondly it had an experienced team of teachers who'd all been there for years and had gone up the incremental scale and worked as a team and had a commitment to the school. So and the comprehensive school in the town of Gloucester, which is a cross-class town with a good social mix, suffered as a result, and basically the local authority had actually attempted to amalgamate two schools, a high achieving school with a low achieving school in two geographical areas, and make them into a split site single comprehensive. Standards went down, and the people who were in the area that used to be served by the more successful school were complaining. But it was all about class and all about intake. And actually, you know, that's fundamental, isn't it? And basically the free school business is one of the sops, really, to cover up the real problem in Britain, which is not that just that education is failing, but that's because of the huge social inequalities and class divisions in the country. And actually that's the way to sort out improving education for everybody, is to reduce inequality and actually to improve the living standards and the social experience of all of our children. Can I just say one thing, because I thought the contributions from the two councils was particularly interesting, the thing about services getting farmed out and you don't have the support systems, and then eventually you have to start paying those in, and eventually those free schools will start cutting back because they can't afford them, and people will have forgotten it's part of the tradition, it's what they expected of schools. The same thing that's happened with public services across local government. And I also was very interested to hear about the councillor from Brighton, because in Brighton it's fantastic. We've elected a Green Council, and hopefully some of the people who have voted for Green Party actually know that the Green Party's got fantastic education policies and has got a commitment to a liberal curriculum and to multicultural education and all the other values that the Green Party espouses. And it's a tragedy, isn't it, that actually their hands are tied, and already they're losing. They have very little influence about what they can achieve for the people in Brighton. There should be a democratic consequence for casting a vote. And if we successfully get the votes of people in local communities, it should mean that we, as elected representatives, or the Brighton councils at this point, as elected representatives, should actually be able to implement their democratic manifesto. If you start chopping up schools and giving rights to one generation of parents, and it's one generation of parents who chooses forever what happens in that community, they may be representative. They may have had a proper discussion. There may be 100 parents who have collectively made a democratic decision to seek to set up a free school. But what about the next generation of parents? Who's going to ask them? Can you vote to go back? I suspect not. So we are fundamentally against free schools, I would have said to the Green Party, but we also recognise that that parents have got an aspiration for their children to have a good education, and that's a good aspiration, and we need to address it by promoting the Green Party's education policies and by basically fighting for social justice.
Yes, I fully agree with what you said there. Charlotte Pierce, Cameron Green Party. What worries me is if we go out and say that we support free schools, even on an individual one-off basis, that we're actually being complicit in cutting the link between democratically elected local authority and furthering the